Okay, let me get back to my thing I was talking about before. What was I talking about? You know, I made a lot of videos about a lot of things. I remember I made one called the Euphoria Generator. The point of that is, it is true, I suppose. You know, religion is about creating a religious experience. And that's what it's all about. It's about creating an experience. You know, in life, people create experiences. You know, it's like you can have the experience of being an expert, for example. An experience of being a god. You ever think about what it's like to be God? You know, even if you don't believe in... See, I kind of think it's kind of a thing where creating an experience is the same as creating the reality of a thing. This is why that whole idea of the brains in a vat works. Because what is the difference between the experience of a thing and the being of a thing? You know, there's been some scientific research that's been done where they have this helmet that you can put on that has magnets, electromagnets, that can produce the experience of God, of there being a being in the room, however you want to perceive it. But, you know, people do have religious experiences. I mean, they have genuine, subjective, religious experiences. We all have these sacred experiences and holy experiences and wonderful, you know, experiences that we have. And a lot of that comes from interpretation. You know, I was just thinking some time ago about, like, if you were watching a baseball game and you watch as a batter hits a home run, well, you say, I saw the batter hit a home run. You know, I remember years ago going to Comiskey Park, when it was Comiskey Park and when it was the old Comiskey Park. And I remember seeing a game in which Greg Luzinski, if anybody remember him, he hit a home run. And he hit one that actually went out of the stadium. It wasn't, you know, in Wrigley Field everybody hits home runs out of the stadium, but in Comiskey Park that was harder to do. And he actually hit one that cleared the roof of the place and went out. And it was like, wow. And I remember I was there in that game and I saw it. I was there at the ballpark. Now, when we say we saw a home run, things like that, what did you see? You saw a ball go over a fence. But you know, let's assume, just for the sake of talking about how things can change as rules change. Suppose it was the year 1917. Just to say it. Suppose you were in Comiskey Park. And suppose it was the Boston Red Sox versus the Chicago White Sox. And let's assume, for example, that the score was tied 4-4. The bases are loaded, bottom of the ninth, nobody out. And the White Sox are at the plate, it's the bottom of the ninth. So the batter hits a ball and it goes into the upper deck. What did you just see? You would say, well, clearly I saw a home run. But actually, in reality, you really didn't see a home run. Because the rules, and it has to do with rules, you would have saw a single. And the final score would be 5-4. The game would be over, but it wouldn't be a grand slam. Why? If it happened the inning before that, it would have been a grand slam. If the score was different, it would have been a grand slam. But because all they needed was one run, that's all that counted, was the one run. It has to do with rules. Until 1920, they didn't change the rules to what it is now in regard to that. Now, let's talk about another situation, 1927. When Babe Ruth hit his 60th home run. It was a ball that supposedly bounced the turf and then bounced into the, went to the stands. By today's standards, that would be a ground rule double. But back then, it was a home run. If you change the rules, You change what you actually perceive because you change how you interpret things. You know, an activity that might be legal today might be illegal tomorrow. Suppose, for example, cigarettes were made illegal. Well, let's say by midnight tonight, cigarettes will be illegal. You can't possess them or buy them or anything. So you have to throw them out or whatever. Well, if somebody has cigarettes, that's 100% legal. But as soon as midnight comes, you know, you interpret this differently. Now, nothing in the physical world changes. But your interpretation of what you are observing changes because the rules change. That's how things work. What is God? God is how people interpret things. It's how people interpret something in the world. It has to do with rules. If you abide by those rules, if you adhere to those rules, if you accept those rules, then you accept certain things. But if you don't, you don't. So two different people can perceive reality completely different. And it's a matter of conditioning and training. It's like language. The way I kind of think about it, it's like language. If you learn a language, if I say something to you in Spanish, you would understand me. You know, if I were to say, yo puedo hablar español bastante bien para hacerme entender, you know what I meant. But if you didn't learn Spanish, you wouldn't know what I just said. You know, some people would be able to figure it out and some people wouldn't. Those who learned Spanish would know what I just said. Those who didn't wouldn't, unless you got a friend who would translate for you. The thing is that it's like that. You learn. It's a matter of perception. God is a matter of what one perceives about the world. Now, I'm not going to argue whether there is a God or isn't. But for some people, God is as clear to you as the home run. And if you don't understand the rules, and if you're never conditioned to understand these things, then it doesn't make sense to you. And if you're conditioned to think that it's false or it's a myth, then that's the way you see it. Like the way most of us would say that, let's say the god Apollo is just a myth. It's just a myth. It's a story. It's not true. But we know the story. We're familiar with it. But we learn to categorize it a certain way. You know, it's kind of like the way we think about food. The other day, I had, and I was going to put this video up, but I didn't. Well, I was eating a grasshopper, an actual grasshopper. You know, this roasted is already cooked, dead and everything. But I ate it, and it's actually quite delicious. In fact, I could go and get it now, but I won't do that because I don't feel like grossing most people out, at least people in the United States. But, you know, in other parts of the world, people eat things like that. It's food, but we don't categorize it as food in this country and in a lot of other countries. What would be considered food in one culture wouldn't be considered in another. And it's a matter of conditioning, learning to see it that way. It's just that simple. Just like what we consider to be beautiful, what we consider to be ugly, what we consider to be, you know, the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. These are all things we learn. So I don't really get into arguments too much about things like that. You know, should you believe in God? Should you not believe in God? I'm not here to argue that. That's why I don't debate with people about stuff like that. And that's all I had to say.